All right, well, it's absolutely brilliant to have Jonathon Bond on the show today. Thanks so much for coming, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me. Very excited.
It's brilliant that you're over in LA playing your football, but when we're doing the interview, you're back in our hometown. So good to see a bit of my home country. How's it going back where you are? Nice to see the family.
Yeah, one of the good things about our season, the way that it's laid out, is we get to spend Christmas and New Year's back home. So that's kind of something I never really got to do when I was playing in England. The season goes right through Christmas and New Year's. It doesn't just go right through it. Usually you're playing kind of on Boxing Day and New Year's Day. So you're always in a hotel, normally on Christmas. But yeah, playing in America, it's the other way around. We play in the summer. So yeah, I get to enjoy kind of those festivities back home, which is nice, yeah.
Yeah, and I know your mother loves Christmas, so great to be back in that home. And even
actually
more special...
just all day today I was getting all the Christmas like boxes of decorations down from in the garage, and obviously you've met my mum, you'll know her, but Christmas is a big thing. Like their whole house is just packed out. There's nothing in the house that's not got some sort of Christmas decoration on it. So that took about a few hours today. Yeah, it was a long process.
Oh, I love it, and that's what I used to love about coming over to your place. Because literally from December 1, you knew the festivities were going to be all over. It was brilliant. Yeah, absolutely awesome. Lovely growing up in that space as well.
Yeah, it was really nice, and it's nice that they still live there at the moment and get to come back to where I kind of grew up, which was nice. But yeah, like you say, my life's been very different for 90% of the year now, 80% of the year living across the way in LA. So really enjoying. I'm very happy over there.
Yeah, so for those of you those of my listeners that don't actually know much about you, Jonathon Bond, you play as the goalkeeper for LA Galaxy. You've just won Defender of the Year. I've known you since you were about 12, and it was always your dream to become a footballer. Do you just want to give us a bit of background so the listeners know who you are and what you're doing, and how you got to be where you are?
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, kind of grew up obsessed with the game. That was my dream, like you say, to make it as a professional, and did kind of the classic steps and the classic route into doing that, going through the academy system at a club called Watford, which is kind of like a Premier League team that is bouncing in and out of the Championship and the Premier League, up and down, and got my opportunity at that club, and then kind of had through various different loans, and then moved on to a few different clubs, really looking for game time. It took me all around England and the UK, and then I got the opportunity. My mum's American, so I have an American passport, gave me an opportunity to move to America and play out there, and I had an offer that was really too good to turn down to go play in LA, so that's where I found myself now.
And tell me what that was like, just sort of going from sitting on the bench, because being a goalkeeper, you know, it's quite tricky, isn't it? Because when they have a lead goalkeeper, they tend to stay there for quite some time. How did it feel going from that, you know, you trained to be the first team player, but knowing that possibly you're going to have to wait for injury and that sort of thing, to all of a sudden, you know, being that first team player that you are now? Yeah,
it was difficult. I think something that when I look back, I'm 29 now. So when I look back when I was breaking in at 18, 19, something that maybe didn't go in my favour was to break in so early, strangely, because then you're kind of considered a first team player and important to the squad, if not playing every week, because we had a senior goalkeeper who had played in the Premier League for many years and the Champions League. So he was number one. But then I'd broken in enough to be number two, and they wanted me around, and that kind of stopped me from going on loan and really developing. So I kind of did that weird apprenticeship into being a number one, because just basically stepping in for any suspensions or injuries, which there were a few, because the goalkeeper in front of me was a little bit older. So it is difficult to kind of keep yourself motivated through the week, is what I would say. Training becomes your game, and suddenly everything you do in training is massively important, because you're not playing a game on the weekend. If you're playing every week or every weekend, the game is only really what matters. Like during the week, training is obviously important. Of course it is. I'm sure we'll touch on that. But the way the game goes at the end of the weekend kind of shapes how you're viewing how you're doing, kind of thing. And if you haven't got that game, then every day in training suddenly becomes that bit more important. But it was kind of every goalkeeper is kind of in search of that game time. There's only one spot and very limited spots at the top level, so it is a difficult situation, difficult position.
And how did you find that motivation then? Because that's got to come from deep within, hasn't it, for you to turn up to training and have training as your game day, week in, week out, year in, year out?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the individual, but for me personally, it was important to me that I felt valued by my manager and my teammates. So how they saw me and what their opinion was of me was important to me, rightly or wrongly. Some might say that's, it's like kind of external validation, which is maybe not the healthiest, but that is kind of what drove me when I wasn't playing, was that to make sure that I wasn't just, no one knew what I could do kind of thing. It wasn't like, oh, Bondi, yeah, he's just the number 2 or whatever, he's not playing, he must not be as good as number 1. It was important to me that everyone thought, like, are we sure this guy shouldn't be playing, type thing. And that was really important, that I kind of sowed that seed of doubt in everyone's minds. And I felt like I did do that whenever I wasn't playing, to be honest, and gave myself the best chance.
Yeah, and what I remember of you as a kid, because we go way, way back, was your like complete and utter focus for the game. There were times when you were, as a 13, 14-year-old, would come for a massage and you'd be really, really tired, having done a full day's worth of schooling. You might have gone swimming, done a bit of training, but you were so fixed on the outcome that this is what you wanted to do. It was almost like, well, nothing's going to get in my way. Do you think that just hard out relentlessness of the pursuit for being the best kind of stood you in good stead when you had those moments of like, well, I'm still not the number 1 keeper?
Well, I think I was very lucky at the age you're talking about to be doing some of the stuff that I was doing. I was really, my parents knew kind of what I needed, and I was almost like, I was way ahead of everyone my age at that age. If you're talking from like the age of 13 to 17, 18, I was living my life like I was already an established top professional, without knowing it really. Because at that age, I think my parents recognised that you're not going to be getting the best coaching in the world. At the end of the day, as a coach coaching 13-year-olds, serious stuff doesn't quite happen until later on. So my parents kind of recognised that, and like you say, I was coming in for massages even before school. I was doing, like you say, swimming, obviously not so relevant, but my fitness levels were definitely up. And I was going to train an hour and a half with the team, and then an hour and a half after that goalkeeping training. Then I was doing, we were training with our team 2 or 3 times a week, and I was doing extra goalkeeper training outside of that. So it was just, I don't know if I fully 100%, it's difficult for a 13-year-old to recognise kind of the long-term goal and all this work that you're putting in and knowing that it's just going to work out like that. But I had found myself into almost like an elite way of training from a very young age. And the reason why a lot of kids are put into that and they just can't keep up with it, they don't enjoy it enough simply, and they just burn out. They just think, I've had enough of this, I don't want to do it, I don't want to enjoy it, I want to go with my friends, I want to go do this and that and that. But football's really all I was kind of obsessed. So that obsession a little bit was driving almost. Like it's all I really thought or talked about with my friends. My friends that I surrounded myself with were always people who loved football. So that's all we used to talk about, So it's just, you get caught up in like a world where football is everything, and then doing those things suddenly doesn't seem like a chore. It just seems like, oh, this is going to help with me become a better player. So, and weirdly, actually, off the back of that, when you sign your professional contract 17, 18, my parents, obviously, they don't know what, they've never had another kid who's gone through the whole professional system. My dad was never professional. So at the age of 17, 18, they backed off, because you become full-time and you kind of they handed me over to a football club, professional football club, thinking that you're going to have, right, this is it now, you're going to be training like a real elite sportsman. And it's not the case. It's just not the case. Like, yeah. So then there was a bit of a dip, and you realize you're kind of living off all that work I did for 6 years leading into the age of 19. And it takes maybe a few years to realize, well, maybe I need to take control of what I'm doing again, and finding my own training outside of the club's training. There's a lot going. People assume that football clubs probably just have the best processes or the best people in place. It's just not the case. There's so much going on. There's so much change. People are in and out. People are looking out for themselves. You know, it's just, you think you're going to get in the elite clubs, you do. You know, in the top Premier League clubs, you do. But in the club, some of the clubs that I was in, you don't. You have to quickly realise that you have to take control of your own sort of career.
Yeah, your own destiny. So I guess that kind of taking 100% responsibility piece, it matters, doesn't it? Sort of not allowing yourself to become just another number, or just a pawn in somebody else's political game in the sports world.
Yeah,
but
100%.
How did you then transfer or cope with going from like an amateur sportsman as a kid into professional sports? And how do you keep that element of fun? Like you've mentioned, you didn't get bored of it, you didn't burn out because you still had that drive and that element. But how did you kind of bring those aspects in and make that transition? Was it easy for you, or?
I don't remember it being too difficult. I remember thinking, wow, I'm not going to school. Like, I'm not going to sixth form, or I'm not going to uni when all my friends are doing that. Instead, I'm just playing football during the day, and the days are finished at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the day, kind of thing. And you quickly realise that's not great. Like, you should be doing more. But at the very start, first when you get like full time, it was just cool. Like, I just thought, wow, this is amazing. This is what I wanted to do. I had my idols as well. So at the age of 14, 15, I was looking at Petr Cech, who's a goalkeeper who used to be at Chelsea. I was looking at Cristiano Ronaldo. And I mean, every day when I come home from school, I would go into the garden and start taking free kicks like Ronaldo. I was a goalkeeper playing, you know what I mean? But like, I was still obsessed with that. And I used to remember thinking, oh, it's cool if we could play on a Saturday at 3 o'clock kind of thing, because that's when they play. And what do they do during the week? And they finish at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, they go, and then, you know what I mean? I just thought it was cool that I was then copying, or I was able to live the same sort of lifestyle they had been living, kind of thing. And yeah, so I didn't really have it wasn't daunting, it wasn't boring, it was just exciting and cool. That's literally how I was viewing it when I transitioned from one to the other.
And you've hit a really interesting point there as well about obviously you had your role models. So how important is it for you as a professional to be a role model for the next generation of footballers coming through?
Yeah, it is very, very important. So one of the main ways I do that is through doing podcasts like this, because you never know, you might have 2 or 3 kids that listen, and there's just so many things that I wish people had said to me when I was younger, that no one did, and it would have helped so much. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things. I'm still in my career right now, but when I think ahead, maybe if I have kids, I know exactly what I'm going to be saying to them if they want to become a professional sports person in any field, because it's applicable anyway, I think. But yeah, it is obviously really important, and I think football or soccer in particular is becoming more and more professional. You know, you look at the individuals that are playing now, some of the kids that are coming through, there's no messing about. No one is taking time off. Everyone's got there through pure hard work, through top coaching, it's just becoming, there's so much money in it now. It's just becoming more and more squeezed. You're competing against not kids from Watford or kids from Hemel. You're competing against kids from Brazil who are coming over, and do you know what I mean? Everyone wants to come over here because this is where the money is and where the top level is, and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's very competitive.
So you've said that you know exactly what you would tell your own kids. Can you give us a little snippet of what that might be? You know that Jack is fastly following in your footsteps in terms of the love of the game. And it would be a dream of his to become a professional athlete, be it cricket or football. So what sort of advice or tips would you give somebody who is a 13-year-old kind of looking at the end game? And to be honest, I think, you know, having spoken to Nigel Winsburn last year, nowadays they just see the end result. So they just see, okay, well, the shiny boots, the big cars, and to be honest, that's not Jack's motivation, and I know it's not a lot of other kids' motivation. They just want to play the game that they love. But can you kind of give us an insight as to what you think would have helped you as a 13, 14-year-old?
Well, one thing that did help me, which I did do, was watch a lot of football. So I knew by watching Petr Cech, who I mentioned, at the times from the age of, I don't know, 12 till 15, where I was quite literally just copying what I had seen them do, you know, in games. And I was realising it was taking me quite far. And I was emulating what they would do, how they would act, some of the stuff. I mean, small things like what they would wear and stuff, which is obviously a bit more relevant. But I was just obsessed with watching everything that they did and why they did it. The other thing is, I mean, if you can enjoy, when you enjoy something, then obsession is not bad, I don't think.
Yes, I agree,
Obsession always has a kind of like a negative connotation to it, but I was literally obsessed with what I did, and I think that really helps. It's all, I just lived and breathed it. It's all I thought about. It's all I wanted to do every day. And when I was probably, I don't know, 12 till 15, I was probably playing, like having fun, but in indirectly also training. Do you know what I mean? Like I was just, there's so much time with the ball that I was definitely doing way more than what, I don't know, everyone else, all the other kids my age were doing, kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I realized now looking back that I was weirdly like, wow, okay, it wasn't training as such, but it was just doing a lot more than what other kids my age were doing. Yeah, I mean, there were various other things, but you know, off the top of my head, there are a couple.
Awesome. And so from that space then, moving on to routine, how important do you think routine is for you to maintain the level that you're at?
Yeah, routine's so important, so important. I need it. And some people, I don't know whether that's relevant to everyone. It's really important for me, I should say, because I have a routine. So, for example, this season just gone, our season ended in September, October. And I did the same thing pretty much every week. I knew on a Tuesday I was going to extra training after my club training. I knew I was doing the same thing on a Thursday. I knew you'd be doing heavy loading and training as in at the club on a Wednesday. And it just, I don't know why I find it so important, but I do. Okay, for example, so when I landed here, and I've got now 6 weeks, say, or 2 months here, the first thing I look to do is to create some sort of routine. So I've managed to do it now already. I know on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm training my PT or with a PT in Hemel, which is connected to the guy who I train with back in LA. And then I know I'm doing my upper body sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then I can kind of formulate a plan socially around that and fitting things in around that. And for whatever reason, it just works for me, and it's really important. It just helps with consistency, I guess.
Yeah. And do you find that you get pulled away or there's anything that gets you pulled away from that routine? Do you have to be quite steadfast, or are you quite good at going, no, this is what I need to stay mentally and physically fit?
Paranoia is probably what keeps me, because like I just think, if I miss one, you know, am I going to miss what if I can't make the next one? And I've missed two, and then it's like, and I'm running out of weeks. Like, I've got pre-season coming up, and that's maybe not the right answer to give you, but I'm worried about how it will negatively affect me. You know, if I miss sessions, or if I miss. So when I'm in season, if I miss 1 or 2 sessions during the week, like extra, I mean, outside of the club training, I'm thinking, what if I have a bad game this weekend? You know, I hit myself that I missed that session. Or like, does the universe like punish me for missing a session, and then it means I'm going to have a bad game? Do you know what I mean? Just weird stuff like that. And so I
It's
don't want to give
interesting where
myself
the mind
any
goes,
chance.
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing with like staying out late or having a bad sleep. And straight away, if I have a bad sleep, I'm thinking, oh no, okay, I've got 2 more sleeps before the game. Am I going to catch up on that sleep? Just weird stuff like that. Because
how do you
it's
pull
all
yourself
basically
back from that then? Because it could be quite easy to go down a bit of a rabbit hole with the what ifs and that overthinking. So how do you pull yourself back from that? Do you bring yourself back to routine and just do the best that you can with less sleep or what have you?
Yeah, I think with experience and with time and playing enough games, you realise that just because you miss something or something on the week, it doesn't mean you're gonna have a bad game on the weekends.
Yes.
Sometimes I could have the worst week of training in the world and then have an unbelievable game at the weekend. It doesn't always work out like that. Obviously, if you kept doing that, then it would negatively impact you. But it's just same with superstitions. When I was younger, I used to be like, oh my god, so superstitious about, oh no, I've got to wear those pair of boxers for that game on the weekend. I wore those last weekend and play really well. And then you just realise it's all rubbish. Like it makes no difference. It's what makes a difference is how you train, and your mindset and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love it. Do you know when Jack was little, we'd go to a friend's house and he might be wearing a football top. And obviously we live in New Zealand. And so he'd go wearing his football top and then they would say, they get the football out and they'd have a kick around. And then one of the kids would go, oh, let's play rugby. And Jack would literally freak out and go, I haven't got a rugby jersey. I can't play rugby. And we're like, mate, you're not going to turn into, you can still throw a rugby ball around. And I mean, he was only probably 5 or 6, but he was literally like, no, Mum, you've got to go home. You've got to go and get the rugby jersey because I can't
get the
play.
rugby jersey.
So luckily we were able to kind of shift that mentality. But you could see from a really young age that he had the ability to have those worries and have that, but if I don't do this and I don't do it that way, then this is going to happen. It's like, oh mate, crack up. Still so good. So in terms of being a professional, obviously it comes with its own pressures. You're in the media all of the time, especially playing for a club like LA Galaxy. How do you keep yourself grounded?
I don't think it's that difficult because I've not had to deal with like a high level of fame or anything like that. So obviously I have experienced or known players who have had to deal with that, and that is difficult because you quite literally are worshipped, especially in this country. It's just like a small bubble, But for myself, it's not that difficult because it's kind of, it fluctuates depending on how well you're doing and how much you're playing. When I first broke in at Watford, then I was famous within Watford. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
Going through Watford and stuff, then everyone's like, whatever. So you get a small taste of it, but I'd never had to really deal with the reality of keeping yourself grounded like that. So, I mean, in terms of if you're meeting people who haven't been involved with professional sport, whatever, then it's kind of like impressive to them. Or but I think once you meet several people within professional sport, you realise they're just so normal and completely normal people as well. So it's not it's nothing major.
Yeah, and I guess for you, because you've wanted this for so long and because you've put the hard work in, I guess if you have a bad game or people perceive you that you haven't had a great game or what have you, just the nature of the sport and the nature of social media these days, there are going to be, for every 100 comments, positive comments, there might be one that they'll say something. Do you think because you have got your routines, because you prepare, you spend a lot of time preparing, because you are probably your own worst kind of critic in terms of how well you've played or not, do you think that helps prepare you for potentially somebody giving you that negative response, be it in the news or just a keyboard warrior or what have you? This
is something that I definitely need to get better at still, even at 29. 30 in a few months. Having those comments on Twitter or Instagram or DMs or wherever it is, or reacting to a bad game, it does affect me. So when I do have a bad game, that's one of the things I would like to be better at, is to not care about it as much. Not necessarily that it affects me, but it's almost like I care too much, that then I'm worried about the next game, and then that can negatively impact the next game. The other thing is, like you say, negative comments. Sometimes it can be from like a 9-year-old. You wouldn't know. Do you know what I mean? If someone stopped and said, "Look who wrote this," and then brought them to you, and you'd be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe that comment annoyed me."
Yeah. I've just spent 3 days worrying about that.
You don't know who's behind them, and like it's annoying when you get the comments and stuff. But I've had enough bad games now and played enough games that I've seen enough of it, and I still enjoy being on social media. You just kind of block certain people or block out a few things, and you appreciate the good stuff. Don't get worried about the bad stuff, and just get on with it. That's something, like you say, about if you play at the high level, the amount of good stuff and the amount of bad stuff just goes up times a million. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I've seen it. Yeah. So you probably become numb to it both ways, kind of thing. And it just, but when you're maybe even playing at my level, then suddenly you don't get as many of those comments, then it can almost be more personal. Do you know what I mean? It can be worse. So it's interesting.
That's a fair point.
So no, it's something I'd like to be better at, for sure.
And something you've touched on a few times now is like experience. So like experience tells me this, and I've played enough games for this. So I guess in terms of building up people's confidence, it is a case of how many hours on the ball, how much hard work you've put in, kind of being able to look at yourself in the mirror and go, have I given it all I've got? Because if you know that that's the answer, then you know, regardless of how well or bad the game goes, you know that you've given it everything, and that's all anyone can really ask for. It was interesting, actually. Obviously I support Arsenal, and we've had a sort of a really rough few years leading up to this season.
Yes.
And you know, certainly being the empath that I am, I always would say to people, it's not like they're going out there to have a shocking game. Nobody goes out there to perform badly. And I think it's something that's even down to the grassroots, when you see people getting frustrated on the sidelines. It's like these kids or these athletes, they're not doing it to piss us off. It's truly, they're going out there to give it their best. And sometimes as spectators, we can't see what you guys see. We don't know what's going on in your personal lives. We don't know what's going on in the changing rooms even.
That's one thing that frustrates me, is that I think fans forget that there's a whole week before the weekend, kind of thing, and they just think that we just go to sleep all week and then we just wake up on the weekend. That's just our life, kind of thing. There's so much that goes on during the week that actually matters in training. And there's so much thought processes and effort, and like everyone's trying to pull in the right direction, might be meetings, whatever it is, and it's all going towards that game. There's so much effort being applied, and then maybe it doesn't work on the weekend. Whatever happens, like you just can't foresee why it doesn't. Someone's made a mistake and you end up losing the game, and then you just get this barrage of abuse from people, and it's so frustrating. But I mean, Arsenal's quite an interesting thing, because it's been like 15 years of really bad times compared to what we had before. So that's when it's something that, you know, the players, it's weird, because when you're talking about that period of time, then it's something more than the players. You know, I mean, that's like something within the club that there's something needs to change. But then once all the fan base realise after 4 or 5 years, we can't keep blaming the players, let's blame upstairs, then all the barrage goes to upstairs, and like maybe they're making the right changes by this point, and the players need to do it. You know what I mean? It's just like, there's always got to be like a fall guy. Everyone's just got to get that barrage of abuse to someone. It's someone's fault. It's like a blame culture. It's always someone's fault, when sometimes it can be everyone's fault, kind of thing.
Absolutely. And these things just take time, don't they? You know, when you're trying to change the culture of a club or a team or you're trying to bring in the right people, maybe youngsters coming in, and you've got that trust in the process. It's not going to take a season. And
exactly.
It is an interesting concept, and football, I think, is probably one of the biggest sports, certainly in the UK. I mean, you just only have to look at the England football team, the expectations that's on them, and they do one thing well and they're glorified, but just as quickly they're taken out at the knees if it doesn't go so well.
Exactly.
But my beautiful kiddies, obviously they know you. They've got a couple of questions for you, and it was quite hilarious because I said Jack obviously follows you quite a bit, and I said, have you got any questions for Jonathon? I'm chatting to him tomorrow, and he was like, does he call it football or soccer? I said, Jack, mate, is that all you've got? So that's the first one. So we'll get that one over and done with.
I call it football.
I said, of
but I
course
threw soccer in there as well. Because what I've had to start doing is like field and pitch, for example, or shutout and clean sheet. So I end up saying both to kind of be respectful to everyone. So absolutely. I go, we kept a good clean sheet or shutout. Do you know what I mean? I'm doing it on purpose, but like I've got to kind of, I'm in a different country now.
Respecting,
and And do you know what? When you move to a different country, it seems all weird at first, and then you realise, I know what they mean. Like, it's just different words. And now I think back to what we say, and we actually sound weirder. Do you know what I mean? It's some of the stuff that we say, like clean sheet. What are we talking about? Clean sheet? Like, what sheet?
What sheet?
It's weird. Yeah, exactly. So, I think that's where it came from. But it was interesting transition from one to the other, and now I just sort of say both.
Yeah, and how, like culturally, how have you had to shift from that? Was it a big culture shock moving to America, or? No,
it wasn't, because I've been there a fair few times. My mum being American, I have family over there, and I kind of knew what to expect from the culture side of things. I didn't know what to expect from the football side of things. So I was a little bit nervous going into the first couple of games, because it's just, I've played international football where you're playing against another country. I've never played in another league outside of the UK, which I didn't know what to expect. But I got used to it really quickly. So it was all good.
And from what I can see, the fans have really embraced you as well.
They've really helped, honestly. I think within the first couple of games, felt like a real warmth from the fans, and that kind of relaxes you, especially as a goalkeeper. It's like you feel that love from the fans, and it just gives you that bit of confidence. And now 2 years have flown by, and they've really been a big part of that, to be honest. So it's been really helpful.
Oh, that's lovely. And Jack wanted to know who was the hardest striker you've come up against, and why? Like,
Aguero. When we played against City, I'd say Aguero, because I didn't even notice him during the game. I just forgot he was playing, and then he gets one chance, scores, and he scored a hat-trick in the game. I was just like, how has he done that? He hasn't hardly touched the ball, kind of thing. And he got 3 chances, and it was clinical, 3 goals. Just from that point of view, Aguero. There's been several players, like all the players for Chelsea, all the players for City, players for Spurs. Yeah, there've been loads of top players. Yeah, so although some of the hardest ones are some of in the lower leagues, when you're coming up against a huge striker and they're just lumping it in, really testing you, that can be not enjoyable.
Yeah, and as a goalkeeper, I mean, you're mad as far as I'm concerned, but the courage that you have to have when you've got a ball coming at pace and a player coming at pace, and they've got a goal and you've got a goal, and how do you even become in that space? How do you get that laser focus when it's one-on-one, for example?
You stay present, so you stay in the moment. Some of my bad form from when I was younger, so I moved from one club to another. I moved from Watford to Reading, and my first few games at Reading, my time at Reading didn't go well at all. And I remember my first 6-7 games, I was nervous, and that was one of my main things, was I was always calm whenever I played, whatever level. England youth teams, Watford, was always calm. At Reading, suddenly I was so nervous, and I was thinking ahead to what might happen in the game, and I was thinking just about possibilities, almost sometimes worst case scenarios that I run through your head during the game. So obviously I wasn't in a great headspace. But the main thing was I wasn't present. I wasn't clear in the game, kind of thing. And I didn't even know about this thing, present, like being present in a game, until I met someone a lot further on. Because I basically used to play in a state of fear, which I realised when I was kind of like 25, 26. I got a new goalkeeping coach and almost acted as a psychologist to me. And I realised I'd been playing in a state of fear, basically trying not to make a mistake throughout my career. And I wasn't staying present in games because I was worried about what might happen, what's coming next. And it's just simply forget all that. Just watch the game, communicate through the game. Even when the ball's up the other end, you're communicating. You're just watching what's happening. Sounds weird just to be watching, but you're not thinking. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So you're on autopilot and you're just staying present in the game. And whenever you stay present in the game, and then in a moment when someone really is bearing down on goal, you're just so clear and on autopilot. It's kind of everything you do in training just comes out naturally in the game. And it's those moments that they're the ones that build your career, really, is because you have to produce those really special kind of moments, and you do it without thinking. It just happens, kind of thing. And that was one of the most important mental things I learned with experience, for sure.
And that's something that, as a coach, I talk a lot about for people. And I talk about it all the time, about being where your feet are at, and that level of acceptance as well. And once we get to acceptance and being present, that's where the gold is. But it's easy to say, but really difficult to implement. So how did you transition from that? Like, once you realised, okay, I'm not here, I'm there, and I'm worrying. How did you then train yourself to be in the moment? And did it take a long time, or was it like a light bulb moment, or how did it work for you?
That process probably took a couple of months. I just basically changed from negative to positive. It was some stuff would be like body language, was literally sticking chest out, maybe stepping 1 yard or 2 yards higher than you felt comfortable, as in literally on the pitch, coming further out of the box, being louder, maybe in your tone of voice, communicating through the game more and more. And these things really center you. So like communication is a big one for goalkeeper, because you're not always involved in the game. But when you're communicating through everything that's happening in the game to your back four, you feel like you're in the game. Even when the ball's literally at the other end, about to go in the goal, it feels like you're doing it. To a fan you're looking at the other end, if you to stop what you're doing and look back at me, be like Sunday league stuff. Do you know what I mean? He's just stood up there doing nothing. But in your mind, you are fully part of the game. And you're communicating your way through it, and it keeps you kind of present. It does keep you present.
Yeah, and I've noticed that with Pickford. He's such a communicator, isn't he? And you can see that he's directing the team, whichever team he's playing in, be it for his country or his club. There's that constant narrative, isn't it? And obviously he's sort of quite a character anyway, but you can see the influence that he can have over a team.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my personality is being a deep thinker, which is not necessarily a great thing. Like sometimes I look at other goalkeepers and it literally, they're not thinking about anything. They don't really care. That kind of mentality sometimes I'm jealous of. Whereas I'm always like, I don't know, if I've had a bad game and thinking about it, I'm like, I had a bad game. Whereas I look at some, they're just like, I didn't have a bad game. I mean, I'm brilliant on this and that. And I'm like, and I think, part of me wishes, there's pros and cons to both, obviously. But
being a fellow deep thinker, I'm the same, but I think with that deep thinking reflection, it takes you to the next level. It pushes you, because you know that there's more in the tank. And I think, the positives outweigh the negatives sometimes, but maybe not at 2 o'clock in the morning. And Sienna would love to know what the hardest match is that you've won and what made it tough.
Um, Hardest match that I won. I'd say the hardest match that I drew was probably the first. I didn't win it actually, but the hardest game that I've had to play would have been my first league start for Watford. So, as a 19-year-old, it was live on TV on a Friday night.
I remember it.
The thing about Friday nights are everyone is watching that game because half the teams who are going to play on the Saturday are in a hotel the night before a game. So, like, what do? You stick on the Friday night game. So I knew everyone was watching, and it was my first start for Watford. We're going for promotion, and it's one of those things. Like, I don't know whether it would have worked out like this or not, but if you don't play well, it really seriously affects how they can trust you going forward, and the amount of chances you're going to get become more limited, as a young goalkeeper. But to go into that game and play really well, really, I can't remember whether I won man of the match or didn't, but probably maybe should have, and it was like a big deal. And we drew 1-1, played really well, and got loads of plaudits, and that kind of set me up. I'm like, right, okay, everyone knows what I can do now, and made a little bit, I kind of set a stall out, put a flag out, right? Everyone remembers, you say my name, Bond, then in the back of my mind, the back of people's minds, at least for 6 months, they were like, oh yeah, that's the keeper at Watford, and that kind of thing makes a difference when you're young, and that was a really important moment. Yeah, important game.
And if there was anything that you could do differently, looking back, what would you do?
I would have let go of trying to. I think there was a point from 19 to 21, 22 where I was sitting comfortably, England international. I was number 2, so I wasn't playing every week, but I had good profile. So my ego was taken care of because people thought, oh, he's a good young goalkeeper, he's going to end up playing there. And I kind of let a few years slip by without pushing to go out on loan and play games and get that experience. And I kind of enjoyed the fact that the club wanted me to stay there, and I stepped in when necessary, played well, whatever. And then that caught up with me, I think, a few years down the line, because there have been other keepers who were having to do their time in League Two and didn't have the profile I had. And they bode their time, and that really paid dividends for them in the long run. Because then when you're getting judged, ultimately when you're getting judged, it's very difficult to shift perceptions once someone's made their mind up about you. So ultimately they got judged later on, once they already had their games and when they were ready. Whereas I was getting judged as a baby, really, when I wasn't quite ready, got thrown into the fire, and I hadn't done my time, just hadn't played my games. And I felt like that set me back a few years. So it's not something that's applicable to everyone else, but maybe you can draw lessons from that. It'd be not to get comfortable, to keep pushing, to realise that games are really important, and to let go a little bit of my ego and what people thought of me, kind of thing. So that was probably the biggest one. Yeah.
Fascinating. Oh, hey, listen, I know that you're in a restaurant and you've got your beautiful family waiting for you. So I'm going to love you and leave you, but I've got one very important question. I know in all of the years that we worked together through those kind of formative years, it was Born Identity or Born Supremacy. So we've got to every week we put one of those two movies on. I need to know, Jonathon.
We never finished them though.
No, we never did.
It's just the same always first hour.
Totally. With the old DVD players, like But I need to know, just let's put it to rest. If you had to choose the two, Born Identity or Born Supremacy, which one would it be?
I'd still choose Identity. What would you choose?
Same.
I don't know.
Everyday Identity. It's where it starts. I mean, obviously.
Exactly. It's the first one.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Brilliant. Oh, listen, it's so good to catch up with you after so long. It's great to see you doing so well. And I really appreciate you taking time out to come and hang out with us. And I look forward to seeing how your season goes next season.
Thank you. No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Cheers. Take care, mate. See you soon.